Let's go now, a little life out here. What the hell's going on out here? Hey, what about that now?
Hello everybody, welcome to the UK Packers podcast. As usual, I'm your host, that's DDD NFL on Twitter, and of course follow the group at UK Packers. I want to talk about the Packers Huddle event in London and in Dublin. Just an absolute dream, fever dream come true. But I just want to stop. I just want to get straight into this game. What the hell are you all What are you moaning about? What are we all moaning about here? It's really annoying. And I'm not going to tell you how to fan, right? Fan whoever you want to fan. But I'm going to come up with my opinion and I'm going to back it up on stats. I just don't... The absolute freak out and the call from Matt LaFleur's head again. Now, before you switch off and go, oh, this guy's a homer, you know, all he cares about, he wants your organisation, I'm going to point out the good, the bad and the ugly. And I'm going to get into the parts that were bad in this game. But the overreaction is just next level. I don't get it. I really don't get it. Well, I do get it. I'm going to come up with reasons why I think it is the way it is. I just don't think it's justified. I think the reaction is too much, right? Let me start with this. And I'm going to look, I'm not putting a silver lining on it. I actually think we're in a good position here. And I'm going to detail why I think that. I'm also going to detail why I think, we need to cool the jets here on being entitled to and moaning all the time. Because, and before you switch off, I'm going to back it up, right? We're top of the division. And I know what you're going to say. Yeah, well, in spite of blah, blah, whatever, right? We're 3-1-1. And like I said in the last podcast, we were one play in each of those games away from being 5-0. And then we are the team who just gets stuff done, right? The Packers have been, apart from the Browns game, scoring on offense sometimes at will. And yes, there's some brain fart moments there. And there's stuff I'll get into a little bit later about things that they're unhappy with LaFleur about and the stuff that he's doing. But I'm going to break down the plays here, right? And I challenge you to challenge me and tell me where you think it's all going wrong. Because I just don't understand it. We're top of the division. Yes, we're one game behind, the Lions because they've won 4 games. And people are like, oh, well, it's a technicality that we're top of the division. Not really, right? We whacked up 40 points on the Cowboys. That's how the rules work. I know the American audience are not used to tying, but we are. I mean, we've seen games that are 0-0. And on top of that, so the big elephant in the room is that LaFleur isn't aggressive enough. Is that he punted in the game and he should have went for it, and what's he thinking? Let me just remind you, the Packers were 10-0 at the half. And then the Cincinnati Bengals come out in the third quarter and they zap up over 10 minutes on a drive. And they come away with a touchdown. Death by 1,000 third downs, right? Even a fourth down play. So they go and do that. They zap up all the time. The Packers then get the ball back and put together a heavy drive themselves, which shuts out the third quarter and goes into the fourth. So that's why it looks like it's close, because it's 10-7. So the Packers are the best team in closing teams out in the first quarter, and I believe the first half, potentially. So you're up 10-0. The spread had you at, 14? So you were a field goal and some change away from, meeting that spread immediately. We ended the game 9 points ahead. So, yes, they predicted we had an extra touchdown. But why were people so low on the Bengals? Despite the fact that they have T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Noah Fant, Perrine. I mean, they've got some great players there. So why were they so low on them? Well, Joe Burrow's gone out with turf toe. And they had a quarterback in there who was a turnover machine, right? They were god-awful. And then they signed Flacco, and Flacco came over from the Browns, and he was atrocious for interceptions as well. So they thought, doesn't really move the needle. And also, how can a guy come in with 2 days practice and do anything? Surely you're not going to announce him as the starter, right? They did. And then they go, well, same applies. These are still, they're rubbish until you prove otherwise. They did a couple of nice things in this game. But to me, all they did was there was a couple of busted coverages on defense, but not many, and I'll point those out. And then they just went to Jamar Chase every other chance that they can get. Why? Because they were behind 10-0. And so they couldn't lean on their run game. So, of course, they go to the one player who won the Triple Crown last year. So they go to him and they keep hitting him with back shoulder throws. And was our defense not playing off him like, the Packers of old, where we would pick the best player on the pitch and then just knock on near him and play zone. No, the only person that got that treatment was T. Higgins. And he converted it a couple of times. But most of the time we were playing man or playing double man coverage on him, and he still came down with the ball. Some guys simply can't be stopped. To put it into perspective, their touchdown, Jamar Chase was being DPI'd by Keyshawn Nixon in double coverage with none other than Xavier McKinney, who was a revelation last year. To the point where he had one free hand on 4th and 5, and Joe Flacco still hit him, and he still came down with him with one hand. Some guys just make plays, and certainly Jamar Chase is at times uncoverable because Keyshawn Nixon was either getting flagged for DPI or, Carrington Valentine batted that ball away in the second half, and even he was so delighted with it that he started doing Jamar Chase's celebration. Now, that's not great, right? Because, they went out and scored that 4th and 5 straight after that play. But that just goes to show the calibre of Jamar Chase. So, look, sometimes you come up against guys, and if you're going to throw desperation throws to somebody back shoulder, they're hard to get anyway. If someone can execute it, it's Joe Flacco, because he still has an arm. That's one thing he still has going for him. He's the second oldest quarterback in the league. And then if the person on the receiving end of that is Jamar Chase, well, then you're very fortunate as a team. And then we look at it and people are criticising the defence and it's not as dominant. I think we've been biased and our opinions been skewed by the first two games. We come up against the Lions, who I thought they were. They're a good team. They should be top in the division if we hadn't got that draw, and that draw had fell to a loss. They'd be top in the division again. They're putting up massive points on people, despite losing their defensive coordinator and offensive coordinator. And so we saw the Micah Parsons hype come in, and then he backed it up. And I just, you know what it's like? It's like being an Irish soccer fan. And we call it soccer here as well too, because football to us is Gaelic football. So back in Jack Charlton's era, Jack Charlton was this English guy, incredible player, England 1966, Bobby Charlton's brother. He came in and coached Ireland. Ireland had the likes of, Roy Keane and Aldridge and Casino, Cascarino, I should say, Cascarino, all these great players, Dennis Irwin. And Ireland were actually a good soccer team. And then, ever since then, we've it's like Man United. I'm a Man United fan too, unfortunately. You get stuck in this time warp that, we're good, right? And it's hard to admit that you're not then. And so that's what it's like. And I'm not saying we're not good, but it's just that we had two incredible games, and it's like we're stuck in that, when are we going to get back to that, as if that was the gold standard. What if that was the best case scenario? Particularly against the Lions. We had a great first game, and everything else, because it's the NFL, is going to be a bit of a slog. Because we've seen that Kansas City Chiefs were suffering until they got their win this week. The Baltimore Ravens are suffering as well. There is parity in the NFL, and some teams win when they shouldn't win. And then, Denver only squeaked out a win by 2 points at that game we saw the weekend, which was absolutely atrocious. And somehow the Jets were still in it when they had negative 40 yards. Sometimes these things happen. And so when the Packers, well, let's have a look at it, right? Let's have a look at defense. Dominated week 1, dominated week 2. They dominated week 3 because we come up against the Browns and we held them to 13 points and we still lost. Right? And then you look at this Bengals game. The Bengals scored more than the Browns did when we lost, and we bet them by 9. So when your defense holds the team under 21, typically, you've got a good shot at winning. And the Packers did. And we were up 10-0. You extrapolate that should be at least 20-0. We ended up putting up 27 points, and we got the points when we needed to. And players come up and made the clutch plays when they needed to. So I just don't understand the moaning and the hype. And like I said, one of the things was LaFleur wasn't aggressive enough. He was punting. Let's play a soundbite then, as the last time LaFleur was aggressive. And let's remind ourselves how that went.
Did a great job offensively, moving the ball down the field. But there's a lot of things that we all have to clean up, starting with myself. I mean, we're trying to be aggressive at the end of the half, and that really bit us in the butt.
There you go. Damned if you do and damned if you don't. If he's aggressive, it's why did you do this? Just play it safe, for God's sake. You're up, and then he does. It is what it is. So look, I think the barometer is very high from the first two games. I think we all need to settle in that some of these games are going to be a slog. We're going to lose other games too. But when I look at this game, yes, it was close, but I see the reasons why it was close. And I'm not being a Matt LaFleur apologist here. I know that there's some plays, and Jordan Love too. I mean, that interception was never on. But I liked some of the stuff that he did. And so the way I'm going to do this podcast is I'm going to call out some of the things that I liked off the top. And then we're going to go in and look at the first half. Then we're going to go in and look at the second half. And hopefully by sort of walking through, I'm not really granular, right? I'm just going to point out sort of the highlight stuff that stood out to me. Hopefully by doing that, as he blends multiple words, that, you'll sort of see, all right, well, I didn't really look at it that way. Fine. So first off, Josh Jacobs. My God, what a man. He was extremely sick, apparently, before the game. During the game, he was getting sick. And then after the game, he was sick as well. And he has to be the strongest man ever to be productive with man flu. They need to study this man. If I've got man flu, which I have, you can hear it in me, I've got a bit of a hint of it now. I mean, I just want to crawl up into a hole and die. I certainly don't want to be bursting up runs up the middle, which would be weird because I don't work as a running back, so that would be even stranger, but still, just amazing. Like every other man is like, give me something for the pain and just let me die, whereas Josh Jacobs is scoring touchdowns. Not only that, the video came out of him laughing. The guy's a menace, absolute menace. And then also the kicker. I mean, can we take a moment and just appreciate how glorious that was? Because this is the type of decision that no one will give you as much credit as it deserves if you do it right. And then if you do it wrong, they're like, oh, well, we obviously had a problem here. So if we brought in Mark McNamee, and I was hoping that would be the case because it's a great story and he's Irish and, there's that bias. But to bring in Lucas Haversick, and he does brilliant. 2 out of 2 field goals, long of 43, kicked all his extra points. And again, this guy was looking for a job as a teacher, and they bring him in. And just another master stroke by Brian Gutekunst, because again, it's, they shore this stuff up and they bring someone in and he does well, and you're like, yeah, well, but that's the way it is with kickers. They come out and kick field goals, and you're like, grand, right, get off, see you. We don't have anything to do with you. But the only time we talk about it is when they go wrong. So the fact that he came in and did so well is just brilliant. The other thing to point out, and I know I've said this at the top of the podcast, but Jamar Chase is a different animal altogether. He's one of those guys like Garrett Wilson with the Jets, not this weekend, obviously, that, he can be with quarterbacks and backup quarterbacks, but he still ends up coming down and making his team better. And T. Higgins was good as well. But Jamar Chase, 10 receptions on 12 targets. A long of 19. One of those was a pass breakup by Carrington Valentine. So, he just a great play in the ball. 94 yards, nearly 100 yards. So that's a 9.4 average. And when you look at Joe Flacco's average for the game, it was 4.9. So it was half that. So he was doubling his average yards per play just going to Jamar Chase. And they were back shoulder throws. They were quick slants. And like I said, every single time Keyshawn Nixon was actually playing excellent defense is not great, because if he did, he would have came down with them, I would imagine, but as excellent as you can against Jamar Chase, and even a little bit too excellent to the point where he was getting flagged for DPIs, right? It was blanket coverage, and it's not as if the Packers, which they're akin to do sometimes, is leaving a star player completely open. They targeted and went after him, double coverage, still couldn't stop him. And when they did that, they left T. Higgins open at times, and T. Higgins particularly I found feasted, which is a big word since he only had 5 receptions, and again a long of 19, which is the same as Jamar Chase. He feasted when he was in zone coverage, when they played zone against him and blanketed Jamar Chase man. He ended up coming down with something, and that's what happens when you have a receiver to do that. I mean, we saw that in Matthew Golden, 3 receptions, a long of 35 for 86 yards for a 28.7 average. And a couple of those were in really clutch situations, which I'll detail as I kind of just run down through my favourite plays of the first half. So let's do it. Other honourable mention, actually, I just want to call this out on its own. Special teams. I was really impressed by Savion Williams. I was really impressed by Bo Melton. And there was twice in the second half where they got the ball up to the Packers' 38-yard line. And if you look at their kick returns, Savion Williams had 3 for 96 yards for an average of 32 per kick return, and Bo Melton 1 for 36. So he catches it at the 2 and brings it up to the 38-yard line, and that field position was excellent. Another one I want to call out on the face of it, and I will be touching on him as I go down through some of my favourite plays, is Romeo Dobbs. Again, just absolutely outstanding. Hands of steel, the same as Matthew Golden. When the ball is going to him, I don't feel myself going, oh no, we're going to get these drops. He had an average of 11.2 per catch for 55 yards. And Josh Jacobs as well. You know, the fact that this guy was sick, he went out there and played. And it's just aggressive, really aggressive running from him. And really excellent blocking. And just in case I don't get to it or it gets lost in it, there's a play by Chris Brooks that breaks Josh Jacobs open in this game. And it stood out on tape immediately when I watched it. I'll call it out whenever, if I get to it. But it's worth going back and looking at, because he's not going to get the plaudits that he deserves for it, because the O-line did a great job as well, breaking open running lanes. By and large, and there was some heavy pressure there. But Josh Jacobs coming down with 5 receptions on 5 targets for 57 yards and 11.4 average is outstanding as well. I mean, to catch everything that's thrown your way, most of those obviously are little dump-offs or screens, and he ends up getting down and throwing hands and faces and stiff-arming his way down. And to say that he wasn't well, I mean, I can't sort of overstate it. So I guess, look, let's look at the first half. The summary here is that the defense is absolutely dominant. It couldn't be more dominant by shutting them out. They didn't score a single point in the defense. It was 10-0 at the half. And like I said, I don't blame this defense, and I guess I'll cheat and look at the second half really, really briefly, is that, like I said at the top, they had the time of possession in the third quarter of over nearly 11 minutes. So when your defense is out on the field for 11 minutes, and by and large, and I'll do sort of a little bit of a sort of breakdown of drives, is that typically they end up getting it to third down and then they get burned. And sometimes, I mean, not massively, one by T. Higgins. I think another when their running back ran to the line and just literally poked his nose over and just brought up another first down. So it wasn't a case that our defense were being ran all over. They weren't. And to say you were coming up against T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, who looked unstoppable when they went to him in desperation time, including a fourth down, it's really something else. But like I said, story of that is the new kicker is a bit of a Hollywood story. One thing that stood out for me throughout the game, and Jordan Love sort of picked on it at the end, was his mobility. I felt he was climbing the pocket and he was getting first downs when his legs when he needed to. And I'm going to call out the ugly there, it was in the second half when he should have ran it and sort of iced the end of the game and ran and got the first down, but he went short. Like, this is what I'm talking about, perfection. Can we stop nitpicking, please? The man's out there trying to do a job, not trying to get his head ripped off. And he slides down before he could. And, had he went for that first down, I don't think he would have been able to slide right. He'd have to go sort of head first. And there's dangers for that. And there was 1:40, I think, left on the clock. So it's like that old story about the fictitious hypothetical story about the boy. I'm really off the rails here, but if you're still listening, fair play to you. The boy who's riding down the road on his bicycle. And there's 2 versions of this story. And his mother has chickens and he hits the chickens because he doesn't want to swerve because he thinks he'll fall. And he goes into the mother and he says, "I'm really sorry, I'm after hitting your chicken." She banishes him, never speaks to him properly again and all this, right? It's very hyperbolic. I'll cut it short. And then the second version is he's barreling down the hill, sees the chickens, knows he's going to get in trouble, swerves the bike and ends up falling off and he dies, right? And then the mother's at his funeral going, "Oh, if only he would have hit the chickens, I wouldn't have been mad." You only have to, for the situation to happen for you to realise, that the other alternative was probably worse. And that's the same with Jordan Love. So what? He goes head first to gain an extra bit of yardage in garbage time when we were already up by 24-18. We were not as sure to get the field goal, but we were within field goal range and ended up kicking it and getting it. I think it was 37 yards, if my memory serves me right. Which means that we're up by 9 points. Which means that in 1:40 with one timeout, the Bengals would have needed a field goal, an onside kick, and then a touchdown to win this game, which is very unlikely. So yes, he's diving head first for an extra bit of yardage to get the first down, to completely ice the game, to get a kick that's slightly closer. For that. And had he injured himself, you would have went, well, why is he putting himself in that position at the end of the game? The probability of winning at that stage is so low. Why the hell would he do that? But no, we're here now saying it's a big, massive complaint because he didn't ice the game by doing it. You know what I mean? I mean, there's different ways that it can go, and these are bang bang plays. And again, I'm not being an apologist for him, right? There was a throw to Musgrave that happened in the first half, and he absolutely skied it. And they asked him about it after and said, "What happened there?" And he said, "I just missed him." And he goes, "Oh, did something, an extra pressure?" Went, "No, just missed him." And then on the first drive, that ugly interception on 3rd and 5. I mean, it was never on. Massive pressure. There was 3+ Bengals in that area on that side of the pitch. Around who he was trying to throw it to. I think it might have been Dobbs. And the decision to do it was nuts. And I agree, right? If you get to a playoff game and you're against a team that are, airtight and you do stuff like that, they'll take the ball, they punish you, and then you'll lose the playoff game. Of course. But also, it's a singular play in week 6, and we won the game. So, these things happen. Again, anybody who's watched, we're too used to Aaron Rodgers looking after the ball. And that's one thing I will say. It's very anti-Aaron Rodgers in this game because Love multiple times puts a dart up the middle and Tucker Kraft comes down with one of them. Dobbs, I think, comes down with the other. So this is a different quarterback. We're going to have these moments with Love. But do I think he's a bad quarterback because of it? No. Did it make sense to me when he did it at the time? No, I didn't see it was on at all. But that's what pressure will do to a quarterback. So yes, in a playoff game, that could be the difference, but it isn't a playoff game. Matthew Golden in the first half, absolute revelation. Voice like hands, he gets the ball and he does this sort of, and it's a really quick pass because Love is under pressure, so he gets the ball out to him, makes a quick sort of speedy move and gets up the pitch for 20 yards. The guy's an absolute beast. Then he comes in for a jet sweep and he breaks a tackle and gets a first down again. I don't think Matthew Golden is getting enough credit for the tackles that he can break with his speed as well. There's only one really egregious play on defense in the first half, and that's when T. Higgins finds himself, there's a bunch route, and it's just a busted coverage, and, there's pressure on Joe Flacco, and he gets rid of the ball. And then after that play, that error that the defense make, Joe Flacco ends up throwing the ball into the ground on 3 consecutive plays. So it's nuts. And I just don't understand the criticism in that regard. Quay Walker showed up in the first half. He was amazing. Bullard makes a great play. The defense was really strong. And like I said, there was only one busted play to Higgins so far in the first half. And Flacco looked like he was under pressure and got the jitters. And then Josh Jacobs with that touchdown, which went straight up the middle. Jenkins with an absolutely fantastic block. And then this never happens. And again, LaFleur won't get the credit for it. But he uses a timeout at the end of the first half and ices the kicker. They're in absolute desperation mode, so they go for a 67-yarder that actually, when he'd hit it, bounced off the crossbar and over, but LaFleur iced him and he hit it again and missed. And that was one of 2 that he ends up missing. The one at the end of the game then, that because he goes for, I think it was a 50-something yarder, I'll get to it later, and he misses that, and that just puts the game away. And like I said, the other thing that stood out, and the last thing really that I'll mention in this first half, is that Tucker Kraft makes an unbelievable grab up the middle, which is very anti-Rodgers, Derek Carraher has a stat on Twitter, X, that we shared and said that the number 1 player in the NFL for yak is Tucker Kraft, and the amount of yak that he has is out of this world. And the only other player to put up similar numbers to that is, guess who? Tucker Kraft, but last year. So it's just like the only player better than 2025 Tucker Kraft is 2024 Tucker Kraft. So I think there's loads of positives there. Dobbs coming away with the ball, Josh Jacobs being super strong despite being sick, Love climbing the pocket and making plays with his legs, Matthew Golden getting more involved, showing his voice-like hands, doing jet sweeps, keeping it interesting, icing the kicker, and having one bad defensive fart moment in all of the first half, and we shut them out 10-0. So had the game ended there with a lightning storm, would we have been as low on this team? Absolutely not. So let's have a look at the second half now and have a look at some of these defensive stands. So the defense come out and they're opening the half against the Bengals. And like I said, the Bengals have the ball for a solid 10 minutes. And if you look at the drive where they scored a touchdown, because remember it's 10-zip at this stage and it becomes 10-7. So, for want of a better phrase, it becomes squeaky bum time, right? And we're like, what the hell? Because it's within 3 points when we seem to be dominating or not dominating, depending on how you want to see it. So the defense opens it. We're getting them to third down repeatedly. And it's only we're getting beaten on third down. And you would say, Steve, right, we're getting them to third down. We can't get off the field on third down. That's a defensive problem. But let's have a look at those plays. One was Evan Williams stopped them short of the first down marker. And then there's a second effort where they basically get a push and it puts them over. So then they convert it, but just barely. The other one was a quick slant on 3rd and 4. So it was just the ball went out really fast and the defender was on them straight away. The next one was we got them to 3rd and 1 again. So again, so close with 3rd and out. And 3rd and 1 is nearly a done deal, quarterback sneak, whatever. And then they hold the player up, I think it was a running back, at the down marker, and he just about squeaks it. And then there's a defensive penalty by Green Bay, which gives them a first down at the 24-yard line. And then Higgins is the first on this whole entire drive to convert something that isn't a third down, when he turns a second down into a first and goal. And we're nearly halfway through the third quarter now. We've sort of been they've been plodding down the pitch slowly but surely, death by 1,000 third downs. And then they're on fourth and goal. So we get a stop on first and goal. It's a false start by the Bengals, actually, because we're freaking them out. Then we get a sack by Van Ness. Then Walker and Cooper stop the tight end on third down, and it gets a fourth and goal. And then their tight end Hudson comes down with a catch, but the coverage is amazing. Walker's right on him. In fact, he has his hand on the ball as Hudson is toe dragged, swagging his way out of the back of the end zone. And that drive took over 10 minutes, and our offense is not on the field to score, and so the score ends up being 10-7. And the Packers don't get a chance to score in the third quarter because, they only have 4 minutes to play with. And then we're still on offense again. We bring it into the fourth quarter. So again, third down, they win it on a second push. Third down, they get a quick slant to just about get it. 3rd and 1, they just about complete it. Defensive penalty brings them closer. Higgins finally gets a legit play, which, what's that, one solid play that isn't a third down. And then after that, we make them go on 4th and goal, and only Hudson is toe drag swagging it out the back of the end zone with Quay Walker with his hand on the actual ball, that they end up converting it. So the Packers offense come on with just over 3 minutes left on the clock. And there's some really excellent first downs by Dobbs. And that's the one with the really amazing block by Chris Brooks for Josh Jacobs. Luke Musgrave comes down with chunk yardage. And then the fourth quarter starts and the game is still 10-7. So for us as fans watching it in real time, we're sort of freaking out about it. But then Josh Jacobs starts the fourth quarter immediately with an absolutely steaming run up the middle for a 14-yard touchdown. Sensational blocking, and the score becomes 17-7. And had we known what we know now and how the game ends up, you could sort of have a relax. But we're all Dave on that meme that I keep putting out about how stressful it is, because it seems like we should be pulling away an awful lot quicker. But now it's 17-7. We're up by 10 points. The Bengals need 2 scores to win this thing. And they're desperate. So as they start getting more desperate later in the game, they start going to Jamar Chase more and pulling off these exceptional catches. And this is where Jamar Chase comes into the game. Had they done this early in the game and not stuck to their sort of run-pass game, although I think they were trying to, then I think we would have been in trouble. This guy's ridiculous. So there's a back shoulder throw to Jamar Chase. He's in double coverage, and Nixon was on him insanely close. Xavier McKinney was there too. And it's just individual brilliance. And then there's stops on 1st and 2nd down again. T. Higgins comes in and catches a third down catch. But again, that was really solid coverage by Valentine, so they weren't playing off him. And then Higgins gets a really big gain, and this is one of the only sort of egregious, I think there's 3 sort of, I wouldn't even call them egregious, right? But there's 3 main sort of defensive play softness or breakdown, and this is one of them. Higgins gets a big gain with a soft zone coverage, and that's a bad defensive play. Then we force a 3 and out, and the Bengals get a 45-yard field goal. So again, it's not egregiously bad defense. It's good, solid play from Jamar Chase, and then one bad play from the defense, but we still stood strong, and they only got a field goal. So now it's 17-10. And this is one of the runs I was talking about. Bo Melton comes out and gets a 38-yard line with a run back, which is brilliant. Unbelievable throw by Love to Dobbs, and Dobbs was in really tight coverage, and had he overthrown that at all, was going straight to defender. A really great route by Dobbs as well. Then Love was under pressure on 3rd and 2 and uses his legs. Josh Jacobs comes in with an absolute monster run again. He has his hands up in the face mask, and the other guy, Tucker Kraft, then comes down with that touchdown. And it was every part of that touchdown was earned. It was the yak touchdown, aggressive, hard running. And he was set up by himself really as well. Kraft came in and made the block, sold it as if this was a run, and then ended up, switching it up and catching that ball and running in and just bashing everybody out of his way. When he got to the end zone, he just dropped the shoulder and just ran through a guy. So next defensive plays, It's all Jamar Chase again. So this is the third bad defensive play of the game, I think, and everything else was pretty solid. Jamar Chase comes down with the ball, and that's because Edgerrin Cooper fell down. Now you could say, why is Edgerrin Cooper trying to guard against Jamar Chase? It was a short yardage situation. Had he not fell, he would have tackled him in bounds and it wouldn't have been a first down. And then, like I said, it's death by 1,000 third down, so it's a third down conversion to Chase on a slant. It's really, really tight coverage. Nixon is all over him, and in fact, Nixon broke up a prior attempt just before that, and he gets done for hands in the face on this one as well. So Nixon's being overly aggressive with him. And what it looks like to me is it just looks like Nixon is a player that's hanging on for dear life. Against last year's Triple Crown winner. Like he's topping yards, he's topping touchdowns, and he's topping receptions. And guess what? Gets to 3rd and 5 again, and Valentine makes an absolutely sensational play on the sideline for a pass breakup and does Chase's little dance. So talk about desperation. This is Flacco airing the ball out to Chase wherever he can in the tightest of coverages, and Chase is just that good of a player who's coming down with them. And nothing spells it like, and I mentioned this at the beginning, it's 4th and 5. And that touchdown pass to Chase, like I already detailed, Keyshawn Nixon was all over him, would have got done for DPI at the goal line had he not got the touchdown. He was restricting his arm movement on one arm, so he came down with it with one arm, and Xavier McKinney was coming across trying to rip his head off as well. And he still comes down with it. So the Bengals get that play, and trying to catch up on the Packers, they get that 2-point conversion. And again, you go, well, bad defense as well, Steve, if you want to say that. But again, this was an extended play. The play breaks down. And then, as we know, people start getting open when the play breaks down. So there's just 4 minutes left in the game at this point. So you can see how it all happened. The Packers shut them out in the beginning. They didn't have the ball to start the second half. The Bengals practically run the ball all the way down for 10 or 11 minutes in the third quarter, which means that the Packers have the fourth quarter really to operate in to try extend their lead, which they do. So Savion Williams comes out and makes a great return, identical to Bo Melton, gets him to the 38-yard line. Jacobs makes a good run. Love is then sacked, and it's 3rd and 9. And Love throws that absolute dime to Matthew Golden. So again, what are we moaning about? I don't get it. I really like this play as well, not only because the optics look good. It was sensational because Love was rolling to his left, which is the danger zone, right? When you're rolling out to your left. When you're a right-handed quarterback and you have to sort of half throw across your body. He gets hit while he's throwing it. And then if you look at Golden on that play, if you can see a play where it focuses on Golden and the camera's not whipping about the place, look at Golden. He shallows out the route. So he's running and, he jukes across to the left and you can see him turn his head back and he shallows the route to get in front of the defender and makes that play. So I just think that is a sensational play by both players. Love to go for Golden, and I don't think Love in that moment is thinking, oh, do I trust Golden? He's the rookie. I think Golden is just making a habit of being in the right place at the right time and going up and getting it, and talk about fantastic hands in the clutch. And this is the one where Love slides short, and I just don't think we can overreact to it. It's at the end of the game. The Bengals were trailing 27-18 after Haversick comes out and hits that 39-yarder. It was perfect on the night. And they need a touchdown and they need a field goal to win. And what they actually need is they need a field goal and then they need an onside kick. But again, there's 1:30 left in the half at that stage. So, I'm sorry, Joe Flacco is old and stuff, but he's no Aaron Rodgers, right? He's no sort of like Aaron Rodgers versus the Cowboys where we're sort of guffawing at the end of the game that he's going to do it. So, look, they end up missing the kick from 56 yards and 4th down and the game's over and we top the division. So I just don't get it. The defense shut them out in the first half. They had a massively prolonged drive in the third quarter, and then we came out, and then the Packers looked after business. They go and get their touchdown, they go and get their field goal, and they win the game by 9 points. Had the Bengals faltered, or had we converted one of those many third downs, or had the Bengals not scored on a 4th down conversion, well then again this game would be out of sight, and would we be moaning about Matt LaFleur's play calling? I don't think, when you look at some of the stuff that we did in that game, I don't think he was overly conservative. And I think Jordan Love made a great showing in the sense that he threw that mindless interception and then he came back out and, then he gets sacked when he shouldn't and it brings up a 3rd and 9 and then he makes an absolute dime of a throw down the field. So look, I guess I just don't get the wholesale moaning about it all. if we're playing poorly and not putting up points, and the stuff was really egregious when it isn't. I mean, I counted 3 sort of busted defensive coverages in that game. Everything else, Nixon was basically in his back pocket. I don't think he could have been any closer. And I think the gripe even is that he played him too close. But that's what you have to do with Jamar Chase. And the fact that he was going toe to toe with him, speed wise, is sensational. Sensational. Because the defensive place is leaving T. Higgins open in zone coverage, Edgerrin Cooper falling down, and then T. Higgins again to bring up that 1st and goal. But then we ended up sort of, standing on business there as well. Don't get it. I just don't get the overreaction. And this is the thing, games are going to be tight in the NFL. It's the NFL of all things. And it's one of those things, if you look at the score at the end without seeing the game, you'd go, yeah, well, obviously they did what they were expected to do. And they shut them out. And I like playing that game as well where, you cover your sort of teams and you look at first downs and yards per play and passing yards and completions and time of possession and try guess what the outcome would be, and all of the metrics are pretty close, but the Packers absolutely capitalised on them. The defense did enough to choke the offense with the Triple Crown leader from last year. Look, I think this team is doing the business. I think, players like Josh Jacobs coming in and his leadership when he was sick is outstanding. And, I think the last time he was sick, he did something similar. He put up massive yardage and, 2 or 3 touchdowns as well. So, if they need to inject him with man flu every game, so be it, because he's playing well. But look, I'll end it there. Hopefully this podcast has made you feel a bit better, and hopefully by me calling out the plays both first and second half and pointing out the individual defensive bust-ups and the individual great plays on offense, and of course the couple of brain fart moments, which I don't think there was many of, that you're looking at this team maybe in a different light now and not listening to the boo birds, because you go online and you just get caught in this sort of cesspit of overreaction. And I guess I just don't understand it. Onwards and upwards we go. Arizona Cardinals next. I'll be previewing the show on quick snaps. And I'll also sort of maybe detail a bit more about just absolutely how mind-blowing those London Huddle events were and the Dublin event was as well. Just an opportunity of a lifetime to be able to, work on behalf of the Packers and have their support. It's something that I'll remember for the rest of my life. And the funnest part, seeing everybody that I've seen or brand new people that came up to me and spoke about the podcast. Lawrence, you came up and had a chat with me. Ollie came up and won a prize and he was talking to me about it. So many other people that I suppose I shouldn't have really got into naming names because I could be here all night. But I do remember everybody, and Andy and Steve and the other Steve and Craig and Michael and Matt and all of the Nigel, all of the Isle of Man boys. Like, it's just to be there and to be able to interview players and to be able to just hang out with friends and new friends and meet new friends and new people and hear your stories and do vox pops outside the stadium. It's just a dream come true, and it's kind of why we do it. But anyway, I'm at Steve Diddy NFL. We're at UK Packers. You're the goddamn best fans ever, folks. And we'll see you again for Quick Snaps in a couple of days. See ya.